In Prague, I studied nature conservation, and my research was about monitoring water springs and analyzing environmental factors influencing the water quality. And I did it with the help of a small aquatic invertebrate. This is the freshwater shrimp. In Czech, it is called blešivěc. It is a crustacean like crabs or lobsters and is a very common species in the Czech-German border. My mission was to solve two main questions: why is it absent in some spring habitats and why some populations are more abundant. The scientific name is Gammarus fossarum and is usually not bigger than a grain of rice, but their voracity is a superpower because they are able to break down organic matter straight in the surface of plants, dry leaves, and detritus. Sometimes they can even predate other invertebrates. I cannot find Gammarus fossarum here in Colombia because their distribution is only in Europe. They usually travel upstream looking for better conditions in headwaters. That's why it's very important to study water springs. Our area of study was the humid region in Eastern Saxony and Northern Bohemia, finding diverse types of springs coming out from different kinds of rocks along the Lusacian fault. A representative group of 40 springs were selected from the list reported by the cartography team, some of them flowing to the Elbe River and others to the Oder River. 12 are located in Germany and the rest are in the Czech Republic. The occurrence of Gammarus fossarum was related with several environmental factors from different disciplines. The hydrology of springs is classified in 4 types, depending on how groundwater reaches the surface. We know it is a spring because it keeps constant temperature during the whole year. It can be in form of a creek, a wetland, a lagoon, or artificially conducted with a pipeline. The plants around each spring are key for water retention, and they can influence the quality of water. I classify the vegetation in 4 main types of forest. The geology is also important to understand groundwater. The minerals from rocks can affect the water quality as well, and the porosity can influence the infiltration rate. Land cover in the catchment of each spring can also be influential. When it rains, the runoff gets in contact with pollutants, for example toxic metals from the roads and fertilizers from the agricultural area. For the water quality analysis, the team measured many parameters and I categorized the values following the Czech legislation for raw water, where red is the most harmful condition for life. The toxic metals bound to sediment represent an important risk for biota. We analyzed a group of 7 metals: arsenic, cadmium, chromium, copper, lead, nickel, and zinc. And last environmental factor analyzed was human influence, depending on the level of disturbance from human modifications. This research received the award from the rector in the Czech University of Life Sciences. How did I do it? I performed 2 sampling sessions in the year 2017, one during spring and the next in fall. The sampling team visited each of 40 locations, measuring water parameters in situ with a multimeter and taking water samples to analyze in the laboratory. To assess the macroinvertebrates community, I used composed circular sampling, collecting 6 subsamples per spring with this cylinder, trying to avoid big disturbance to the ecosystem. I spent several hours identifying the hidden life in the samples and counting every individual at the hydrobiology laboratory. The land cover was assessed with the software ArcGIS that allows to calculate the runoff catchment of every spring in the map, and then I analyzed the dominant cover in the surface, either agriculture, forest, or urban. The water analysis was performed by the laboratory of Zittau, and the toxic metals in sediment were measured in Prague, preparing the samples with acid microwave digestion and using atomic absorption spectrometer to determine the concentration of metals. To sum up all environmental factors influencing the shrimps, I used a statistical software called RStudio with GLM, regression, and ANOVA models. What did I find? From the 40 analyzed springs, 25 had populations of freshwater shrimps in the samples. To make it easier to imagine the abundance of this animal in the water, I calculated an estimate of how many individuals would be in 1 square meter. The highest density of population was in Germany, with more than 2,000 individuals per square meter. The most abundant populations were in recurring springs, the ones that flow in a slope. However, there was no trend to generalize that this type of spring should have more Gammarus. They can live in any type of spring actually. Also, in any type of forest. I found abundant populations of Gammarus in springs surrounded by broadleaf tree like Fagus, but also others by conifer like Picea or mixed or just pastures. The Cretaceous sediment geology seemed to be present in abundant populations of Gammarus. However, the statistics are not significant as well. Every rock type can hold Gammarus fossarum populations. The toxic metals in sediment presented a clear trend where more abundant groups of Gammarus corresponded to the lowest concentration of metals. The human influence was not a significant factor. They didn't seem to be affected in the selected springs. However, replacing the natural substrate may have a negative effect. Agricultural fields do not seem to be a problem for freshwater shrimps. They can adapt. Gammarus are detritivores, so they are not indicators of the cleanest water. However, I found that they can hardly adapt to very strongly polluted water, class 5, the red one, as we see in this picture with the rings. I also evaluated the direct relationship of pH and dissolved oxygen with the abundance of Gammarus. I registered a trend where lower pH in water has smaller populations. The dissolved oxygen is beneficial for them as the most abundant population was found at 10 milligrams per liter of oxygen. However, they still live in harder conditions, so there was no trend for oxygen. Here, we can see the springs ordered by nationality. The most abundant population was in Germany, as I said, and many others were in Czech territory. What did I learn from the research and what are the conclusions? Springs with pH below 5.5 units and dissolved oxygen below 2.5 milligrams per liter didn't have Gammarus. The plastic bottom may influence the existence of these forms of life, and Gammarus are not able to survive in conditions where the water chemistry is strongly polluted. For example, a spring with high content of iron, like this one. I confirmed their wide adaptation range in my research, supporting that they can be suitable to assess water toxicity in situ with good reliability of bioassays. Some applications have been used already. Researchers in Germany, for example, have tested with a live Gammarus the efficiency to remove micropollutants in a tertiary wastewater treatment. Other researchers in France have installed cages with Gammarus in natural streams to assess contamination trend in Alps. And these are the abundance drivers I found: higher pH, lower toxic metals, and low and medium level of pollution. The occurrence of Gammarus fossarum does not increase the water spring value. However, it is an important tool to evaluate the environmental factors influencing the watershed. About my personal experience, I was living in Prague with a different culture, and it was amazing to share with people from different disciplines, learning something new every day. With the project, I really appreciate this experience, being in the field, being in the laboratory, and also in the meetings, trying to find ways to communicate and to learn more, to gather information and to explain it better.